up, guys? Hanover here. I'm going to start a new series about, we're going to talk about paint. We're going to talk about equipment. We're going to talk about technique. We're going to talk about airbrushing. We're going to talk about it all. So here's Airbrushing 101 today. First episode in the series. I'm getting a lot of questions on a lot of forums about how do you do this, how do you do that, what equipment do you use, how do I do it? You know, I hear the same thing over and over again. So I decided, you know what, it's time to just make a series of tutorials and talk about what I know. I'm not going to claim to be, I'm not going to claim to know everything about painting, but I'm going to share with you what I do know. And you can take away from it what you can. So let's start off by talking about equipment, the things that you absolutely need if you want to start getting into airbrushing. Of course, you're going to need an airbrush, and what I use, and it's the only airbrush I have, it's the Iwata HPC Plus. This brush is excellent for handling automotive style paints, solvent-based paints. The seals in it can withstand the solvents that I run through it, and I've used this little brush quite a bit. I've only been airbrushing for, God, what is it now? 6 months, 8 months, something like that. Not very long. But I've been painting with mini HVLP touch-up guns for quite a while. I decided to move into airbrushing because of the Brandywine project that I had. I thought it would really look cool with some graphics on it, and it did. It turned out quite well. So I'm a huge fan of airbrushing and everything involved in it. Yeah, Iwata. I don't have a bunch of guns to show you, a bunch of different airbrushes to show you. I just have the one here, and it's never failed me. I can give you some consumer confidence in Iwata's brand. I don't think you can go wrong with it. Now they do range from, you know, 150, 140 all the way up to what, $400, $500, $600. All depends on what you're willing to spend, or how bad you want to get into this. If you feel like airbrushing is something that you really want to try out, you know, it's going to cost a little bit of money. So you're looking at equipment, you're looking at the gun price, or I'll call it the brush. You're looking at the price of the brush, and you're also looking at some other things to go along with it. Of course, you need a compressor to push some air through this thing to make it work. Now there's a plethora of different compressors out there. I happen to use a kind of a large compressor. It's a 20-gallon Pro Force, horse and a half, oilless, which I'm not a big fan of. It is kind of loud, and where I do all my painting and all my playing around with computer stuff is down in my basement. So yeah, I mean, I'm isolated from the rest of the house down here, but I'm just going to tell you what, that compressor is pretty loud. There are compressors that are specifically made for airbrushing, and they're not cheap either. If you want to get into one made from Iwata, I think they start around $250, somewhere in that range, and then they go up quite quickly. Where I do buy all my stuff is coastairbrush.com. They have a huge selection of anything from stencils to X-Acto blades, tape, House of Color paints, which by the way is the only paint I use. Since I sprayed it the very first time, I fell in love with that paint. That whole system is totally awesome. So coastairbrush.com, check it out if you're wanting to get into it. They have some kits put together. They have some airbrushing beginner kits. Not cheap, you know, starting around $400. See one for around $600, which is a really good deal. It's got a nice little compressor, not a lot of reservoir, not a lot of tank storage for air on it, which you know, you could go either way. That compressor is going to cycle a lot if you don't have that air reservoir. If you don't have that storage capacity for air, you know, the thing's going to run, but they're quiet. Those little compressors are very, very tolerable for your ears. So then it boils down to money. What do you know, what can you spend? Boy, I think, you know, if you really want to get into this art form and start checking it out, yeah, it's gonna be a little bit. So you're also gonna need a hose to hook your brush up to your compressor. I believe those kits that are put together normally come with a hose. They actually come with quite a bit of stuff. They come with a little bit of paint. Most of the kits that I see come with Createx, that's water-based or waterborne paints, which I don't use. I do use solvent-based paints. Typically, when you want to start doing multiple coatings or multiple layers of paint to get some depth, you're better off using a solvent-based paint. I've never tried to do any kind of an extensive layering with water-based paint, but from what I've read and what I understand about it, you know, that stuff dries by evaporation. Solvent-based paints, you can control you can kind of control the way it dries. There's different types of reducers. We can go into all that stuff maybe in the next installment. But the first one we're talking about here, this first video is meant to talk about equipment. So we got the brush, we got the compressor. You're going to need a hose to connect your brush to your compressor. Most of you guys are probably going to be running it out of 115 or 110 volts. So watch that when you're buying a compressor. Larger compressors, 2 horse, 30 gallon, they start going up, you know, 220 volt. A lot of homes are already equipped with that, but I'm sure you'd have to install a different kind of outlet and maybe have your panel looked at for the right size breaker for something that big, you know, like a shop compressor. A lot of compressors though, 110 volts, they'll run these brushes just fine. Next thing I want to talk about is, okay, what kind of paint am I going to use? Like, once again, I'm going to talk to you about House of Color. House of Color is available from coastairbrush.com in a lot of different sizes, depending on the paint that you're buying. If you're buying, one thing I did notice, some paints are only available in quarts, and some of HOK's paint is quite expensive. For example, urethane-based candy, that stuff is only available in quarts, and you know, you're looking at 50-60 bucks a quart. On the other hand, they do have a lot of their pearls, their metallics, their graphics available in 4-ounce size or larger, and they also have it available pre-reduced. So I'm talking about reducer. When you buy paint like I do, you're just buying the paint. The stuff is not ready to spray. That's the way I prefer it. I'd rather mix my own reducer in. And reducer is something that basically you're going to be watering down your paint, but it's not water, okay? This is a solvent-based system. And when you go to buy any paint from House of Color, you should look at the technical data sheet that goes along with the specific paint that you're buying. That data sheet, if you download it as a PDF, will tell you everything you want to know about the paint that you're buying. Say you're buying the metallic green, Planet Green, and you download that product sheet, that data sheet for this paint. It's going to tell you how to mix it. It's going to tell you how to prepare your substrate before you spray this. It's going to actually give you a little tip about airbrushing too. Typically base coat, paint from HOK would be 2 to 1 in a larger HVLP gun. But in a application where you're using an airbrush, 1 to 1 is recommended. Because of the small tip size, you're looking at, 0.3 here instead of all the way up, 1.2, 1.4, 1.5 tip size of a spray gun. Reducer's important. If you're going to start buying paint like this, better understand exactly how you need to mix this stuff up. Download the technical data sheet. Know the temperature at which you're going to spray this paint. Down in my basement, it's kind of cold, 68, 70 year round. So I use something called a fast reducer. It's RU310. This is designed for the temperature that I'm actually spraying this paint in. Now, if I was in a little bit warmer climates, 74, 75, 78, something like that, RU311 is a little bit slower. Means it's going to evaporate a little bit slower. This stuff's pretty fast. I really like it. Never had a problem down here spraying with the RU310. But be aware of your ambient temperature, and all House of Color products do have a technical data sheet. Even the reducers, the catalysts, the clear coats, the specialty products. Another little tip about when you're ordering stuff, you got to think about storage of this paint. Now, this stuff stores excellent. It's not going to dry out on you. I mean, I'm sure it would after an extended period of time. But what I do is I buy these little bottles from Coast Airbrush, and they got a little lid and a little cap on them. So, cheap little bottle. I'll write down, use a Sharpie, I'll write on it. Like the project I'm in right now, I use the same 4 bottles. I'm doing the same color scheme. So I'm using a black. So I've got my black ready to go. This is reduced, so it's ready to spray. Mixed it up with my mixing cup. Poured it in here, it's ready to go. Anytime I need it, it's ready to go. It's on hand, it's mixed, I don't have to mess around. I keep a little bit of reducer in one of these bottles, like we talked about. I use reducer when I'm spraying. When I go through a color change, if I'm going from black to, let's say, a silver metallic, I'm going to run a little bit of reducer through the gun and wash it out. Just kind of wash that color out of there. Try and get the black out of there, and move on to the next color, so I don't foul the silver with black. So I have a little bit of reducer, a little bit of black. I've got my adhere to, which is that clear primer. This clear primer is pretty awesome. House of Color adhere to, designed for applications over plastic. This stuff is super sticky, and I use it for a primer. If you've got very, very, very small parts, let's say these pump housings from Bits Power, and you don't want to sand off the coating that originally came from the factory, what I would do is clean this up real nice with some wax and grease remover, get it scuffed down a little bit, then I'll spray adhere to on here without taking that original factory coating off. This adhere to works a lot of magic for you if you got a lot of small parts and you're not into sanding all the stuff off or stripping the paint off of it, taking the powder coat off. Adhere to. I swear by this stuff. So those little plastic bottles, they're cheap, they're handy, I use them. It's part of my equipment. Another thing you might want to invest in, if you're going to be spraying solvent-based paints, be aware that they are harmful to breathe. I use 3M respirator designed for spraying. The dual cartridge, it's the 07193. They have a couple different sizes, a medium and large. depending on the size of your face, I guess. Normal adult human being, I wear a large. This stuff will keep that nasty stuff out of your lungs. So I highly recommend respirator. If you're finicky about stuff on your hands, you know, invest in some gloves. I use powderless nitrile. I believe they're Raven. They're black. You know, sometimes I don't wear gloves. Anytime I'm handling thinner or solvents like that, the cleaning stuff, I use gloves. I don't want that stuff leaching through any cuts in my hands. That stuff can make you sick. Even the vapor off of thinner gives me a hell of a headache and gives me a heck of a cough. So really be careful if you're going to launch yourself into spraying solvent-based paints. Wear that respirator. I can't stress the fact enough that you do not want to breathe this stuff. It'll lead to some pretty nasty outcomes, I think. So always be careful about that. Let's sum it up. Equipment, airbrush, hose, compressor, paint, all the stuff you're going to need to mix your paints, your cups, stir sticks, strainers, respirator. A lot of stuff involved here if you're going to want to get into airbrush, and you're going to have a place. You're going to have a place to do this too. Outside, I don't know. That's up to you. I have my own spray booth in my basement that I built. That's where I paint. It's well ventilated. Has plenty of exhaust and intake, so I'm perfectly safe in there. Next video and the following videos, we're gonna do a stencil. I've got a nice piece of metal, and we're gonna go through the process of painting a stencil. And I'll give you guys a little hint about what it is. It's gonna be the Biomech. We'll do this. I believe I got this one from Chicago Airbrush, another company that sells airbrushing equipment, paints, whatnot. I just thought this was a really cool stencil, and so I got it. These stencils are solvent resistant, so you can use them time and time again. Take care of them. So yeah, the Biomech. We'll be doing this one, and hope you come along for the ride as we go through the process of continuing the airbrushing. Thanks for watching, guys.